Howdy doody, my name is Susie, and this is part 2 of making coffee filter peonies. And in this segment, we're making the ball and the bud. And if you watched the first video on this, we're going to be dyeing our coffee filters in the exact same method. I've taken a couple of glasses of water. I'm using my Wilton colors. There's actually 8 different colors. There's rose, crimson, yellow, orange. And I've combined those colors in a glass of water. This is lower because I've already used it. And I use these colors as my concentrate because I don't want to get a really dark color. I'm trying to create these very light muted colors. So what I did is just take a plain cup of water and then I slowly add my colors until I get the desired hue. And that means adding some of this red concentrate, the yellow, the orange, until I get what I like. Now for the ball and the bulb, peony, I want the colors to be more concentrated and darker because I want the buds, they're new, so I want them to be darker. And I also want the center of the peony to be darker as well. So I made coffee filters just like I did for the large and small peony, and I got my favorite hue of color and I dipped it. Don't let the color that you've made in your cup determine what you think the dye will turn out, because as you can see, this looks very orange, but once I dip it, my coffee filter is quite pink. And this is going to dry slightly lighter, so it's going to be much lighter. But for the centers of the peony, like I said, I want them to be very concentrated. So for some of them, I just came in and dipped the center. So I'm able to get that very concentrated color, which I can then use to create some of the petals for the small bud. But I can also use them to create some definition in the large peony and for the center. So I made a whole bunch of these, and it really is based on, you just have to play around with it. You want to use 4 coffee filters at a time because we're going to be drying them at 250 degrees for 5 minutes. And I've calculated that based on 4 coffee filters. Now, if I want a really dark color, then I can just dip my coffee filter directly into my concentrate, and you can see how much darker that is. Or I can dip my filters, my diluted concentrate, and get this very, very pale pink. Might not be able to tell. So that's all I did of this second color. You know, and sometimes you dip these things and it doesn't add any color at all. So that looks good. It's changed my bright pink into just a hint of salmon. So then I'm going to take my coffee filters, I'm going to put them in the oven at 250 degrees. They're 4 layers stacked, and in about 5 minutes they're going to be dry. So we are at part 2 of the coffee filter peonies. And in this video, I'm going to cover how to make the ball peony, or what I'm calling a ball peony. And we're also going to make the bud. And we're going to start off with the bud. It's the least complicated of the two. And we're going to start off with 18 gauge wire, 18 inches long. We're going to make our little loop. And then we're going to need a styrofoam ball. And this is 1 3/4 inches in diameter. It's 4.5 centimeters. And I got this at the dollar store. So I'm sure that craft stores will have them, but this is the size ball that I'm using. And if you have something else that you want to use, then that is great. And then all we're going to do is puncture the ball. We just add a dab of glue, and we're just going to let this dry. So for the bud peony, we're going to need 3 coffee filters. 2 coffee filters for the petals, and 1 coffee filter are going to be for the leaves on the back. So I'm going to actually cover how to paint the coffee filters in part 3 because we're going to be making the leaf stems, which will include these little leaflets and the leaves. But essentially, I took my coffee filter and I did 1 coat of acrylic paint. And that seemed to work much better because it really gives the paper the texture and the structure that we're looking for in order to create these little leaflets. So 1 green filter, and that is for the leaves. And then we're going to need 2 filters for petal number 6. Petal number 6. And I'm going to take, so I'm going to want 2 coffee filters, and I'm going to want a darker center than the actual petals. So now I've got my 2 coffee filters, and then we're just going to fold that once, twice, 3 times. And if you refer to the template that's in this link, it's going to be this petal. So here's the shape, and you can, rather than counting the number of folds, you can just do it visually. And then we're going to place our petal like this and cut it out. Like this. And make sure you cut out that pencil or erase the pencil, because lo and behold, if you don't erase it or cut it out, somehow it's the first thing that you notice on the flower. So now we've got our 2 petals cut out. We've got our 2 filters cut out with all our petals. So from our 2 filters, we're going to get 16 petals. And then you want to keep the center. And we've got 2 centers, and I might use 1 or I might use both. It just depends on how dark I want the center. And then of course we've got our 3rd filter, which we're going to use for our leaf at the end. So for our leaf, we're just going to take our filter and we're going to do the same thing that we did with the petal. So for our green filter, we're going to fold it as many times as we did for the petals because we're actually using the exact same template. This is going to be our leaves at the bottom of, these are going to be the leaves at the bottom of the bud, these leaves that come halfway up. And then with the leftover scrap, we're going to make our leaflets, and I've got 5 leaflets. But before I actually do that, I've taken a cork and I've just made a hole in it. And I'm adding it to the bottom of my bud. And not only does that help with keeping the ball steady or turning the ball however I want, but it also is great as just like an extra layer of protection. And at the risk of sounding a little bit too cautious, I have been playing around with these flowers and I'm looking, and you know, you bend down, and the thought just crossed my mind that because this wire, it's almost like you can't see it, barely see it. And when you're working with the flower, it's easy to kind of lose track of that. So just as an extra layer of safety, just keep that cork there, even if it's just to remind you that that end of that wire is sharp. And believe me, I came a couple times close to my face, which is why I am using this now and recommending it. So we're going to set that to the side. Now we're going to start on our bud, and we're just going to add our scrap piece of paper to our bud. And I like to use the school glue for the center petal because it really does make the paper nice and soft, and you can really conform it to the shape of the ball. And another thing is you really want to make sure that your wire is centered, because you're really going to be doing a lot of work from the center out. So we've got the center of our ball with that school glue, and you're just going to really smooth that out. We've got the center of the ball, and from here, I don't think I need the other piece of paper, but you judge. These come in handy for all the flowers, so you don't have to necessarily just use it for this. So I think that it's dark enough, I've got enough coverage. Now I want to take all my little petals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the petals down like this, as close to the center as I can. I think you can see how close those petals are to the center. I did notice that when I use the school glue, you can see it leaves the marks, even though it's clear school glue, it left the marks of where all the petals were glued together, which is okay. You can't tell from afar, but it's definitely better to use the glue gun. And we're going to use the glue gun just like we did with all the other petals. We're going to put a little bead of glue all the way around, just leaving the top petals without any glue. And you do have to move fairly quickly on this, because the glue dries very, very quickly. So you can see how the cork really helps move that ball around, and it keeps it from rolling away. So there, I've just overlapped the 4 petals, and you can see it's very close to the center, like this. And then the next row of petals, I'm just going to come down just a tiny bit, and you're just going to take it all the way around. So I've got my glue, but not on the top petals. And then I'm just bringing it slightly lower than the last petal and just shaping it around. I'm not even coming down that far. All the petals are staying in this area. Last petal. So there, that's the last petal. And you just want to shape it into a ball like that, you can see. And then you can just very gently just ruffle that out. And you immediately see all those little petals like that. So it gives you a ruffled effect. And you can see that I've glued all the petals, even coming down a little bit at a time. They really have gone no further than there on the ball. So that's kind of a bit of a guide. So now that we've got our bud, we're going to want to cut our 3 leaves. So cut your leaf petals out of number 6. And then the leftover, you can just cut a whole bunch of little leaves. We've got 3 leaf patterns, and we're just going to, well, you're going to position them how you like, but you want the little leaves to come halfway up the bud. So it looks like the bud is emerging out of the leaves, kind of like this. So bring those little leaves, or make sure they're halfway up. And for the leaves, I do use the school glue because I just find it much easier to conform to the shape of the ball. And I add the glue as I always do, just around there, leaving the tops blank. You see what I mean with this wire like hanging around up here? So I'm glad I've got the cork. So you attach the 3 little leaves like so. And now you can kind of conform it to the ball. And that's why I like the school glue, because it gives you the time to really move those petals around and just make it really nice and smooth and round on the bottom like this. And then you have the added benefit of making those little ends of the leaves, if you want, ruffling them out. We're gonna get our straw, a bendable straw, and we're gonna we're gonna cut a little cross, tiny. It's just gonna create 4 little legs like this. And this is going to help secure the straw to our flower. So we want to remove our cork. I hold it like this. I add the glue inside the straw. And then I can push the straw and it kind of melts right into the flower. And it just helps secure that straw in place. I'm gonna just use that cork again because that wire just feels like it's too close to my eyes. I have to just add a little bit of glue to the bottom, and then I'm just gonna snip off that edge. Then I just cut off that edge. It just makes it easier when we're rolling with our wire. So now we've got our plastic tube, or now we've got our straw, and now we're going to add the leaflets to the straw, because these leaflets are going to create a collar around our flower, which is going to make it much easier to add our tape. So 5 leaflets, and I'm just give them a little fold for texture. And then we're just going to add a bead of glue here at the tip. And we're going to glue that leaf right onto the straw like that. There. So you've got all the little leaflets attached right to the straw. My goodness. All these little glue webs or glue strings, you can use a blow dryer on a hot setting and it melts them off, but don't leave the blow dryer on too long or you'll melt the rest of your glued petals. Then I just take a piece of floral tape, and it's waxy, stretchy tape, and I'm gonna add a bead of glue to the little collar you've got, like so. And it's just a perfect way, an easier way to start rolling your stem, because it does take a little bit of practice because the straw is so slippery. But basically you're gonna just stretch it a little and twist, stretch, twist, stretch, twist, stretch, twist. So another reason why we're using the bendable straws is because when you open them up, you get all these ribs, which make it very easy for the floral wire to adhere to. So that is our bud, and then you can just come in and just move these around. Just ruffle them up and fold them over like this so that it just looks like it's a peony that's about to emerge. That's our bud, and these really add a lot to the bouquet. It breaks it up so it's not just all big, huge flowers. And you'll see that when you attach the leaves to it, it really does create a very interesting and somewhat realistic peony bud. So next, we're going to be making the ball peony. It looks like this. And for the ball peony, we're going to need 11 coffee filters altogether. We're going to need 10 coffee filters for the petals and 1 coffee filter for the leaves on the back. And I'm going to cover the leaves in part 3, but essentially I used acrylic paint to paint my coffee filter because it gives it more structure, as I mentioned before. So then you pick your 10 filters. And I picked it according to, I want the center a little bit darker, such as there. So I went darker in the center, and then gradually the next set of petals, I made them a light pink, and then gradually I made them lighter and lighter. But the last 2 petals, I made sure that had some of this darker pink in the center. And that just creates a nice shading for the bottom of the peony, such as like that. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to need a 2.5-inch styrofoam ball. And I bought them in a package of 6. This is 6.3 centimeters from the dollar store. We're going to need our 18 gauge wire, and it's 18 inches long. Make that little tail. Insert it into the ball. Whoops. And then just glue it in place. It's easier to make the flower when the wire is perfectly straight. I'm just going to let that dry for a second. I'll leave it off to the side. So the first petal that we're going to need is petal number 6. Oops. And it's on the template linked. Petal number 6, which is also the leaf pattern at the end. So petal number 6, we're going to take 1 filter, get the template that fits right into the petal. And we're going to get 8 petals and the scrap center, which we're going to use to cover the top of the ball. And then we're going to need 2 coffee filters for petal number 2. So my next 2 graduated colors like this, until your template fits in place. That's petal number 3. Then we're going to cut it out, and we're going to cut those individual petals 3/4 of the way down. And I'm just layering one on top of the other. So when I flip it, I've got the order. And then next, we're going to need 7 filters of petal number 5, which is this large petal. Now we're going to 7 filters. 3 and 4 makes it easier for cutting. We're going to cut it out, and we're going to cut into those petals. We're going to end up with something like this. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these petals, and then I want 2 petals that are colored on the outside, making a total of 7 filters for petal number 5. And in case your template is a little bit bigger than your paper, because sometimes the paper shrinks, and when I created a PDF for these templates, sometimes it wasn't 100% to scale. It might have been 98% or whatever. If the measurement is slightly off, rather than doing this so that your template is overlaying, just pull the template down a little bit so that you get this scalloped cutout. So now I have my last two petals that have that colored center. We're going to take our leaf and we're going to cut it out just like we did with the first petal. It's the same as the bud petal. All those out, and I'm going to keep these off to the side until the end. And then that little scrap piece in the middle makes great little leaflets. Like this. So you can use the template or just freehand it. We're just going to flip it over so that we've got the order of application. So we're going to start off with our center petal in the middle of our ball. And I'm going to use the school glue because it does conform nicer on the ball. There you go. And depending on the look, you may want to add or subtract some color. And that looks a little washed out. I think I'd like a little darker. So there you go. It's more intense. So I prefer that. Okay. Now, next we're going to be applying petal number 6. And we're going to apply it all the way around, but leaving a small area, maybe the size of a dime or less, depending on what you like. But essentially, we're holding the ball. This is the center. We're going to take these petals and we're going to do a row of 4 around twice. Now for this, I'm using the glue gun. And again, you want to apply the glue to the petal, just leaving this part unglued. It creates movement and texture in the center. So then we're going to do that all the way around. And it's helpful if you hold your flower this way because you can see exactly what you're doing. So just add that little bead of glue all the way around, just leaving those top, the little teeth or the little notches, leaving them free for you to be able to ruffle and move around. So we do our first row like this, just leaving the center open. And then we do our next row and we just want to overlap the last leaves, but we're going to leave them at the same length, or we're going to glue them alternating the petals, but we're going to be gluing them along the same line. It really helps holding the flower like this. Just make sure there's nobody sitting across from you or have that cork on the other end. This is the last petal of the second row of petal number 6. Oops, I lost my spot. There you go. You have to work a little bit quickly. So there you go. And you can see the petals are just at the top, creating this effect. And they're loose so we can work with them afterwards. Now the next set of petals, we've got 2 filters of coffee, or 2 filters, petal number 3. And we're going to do the same as we did with our other flowers. We're just going to feed our petals through. We're going to attach the petal on the bottom. And this just helps us get some control over the flower. If you're making a lot of these, you're going to have to stock up on your glue gun supplies. And now, so this first line represents petal number 6, the ones that we've just attached. The line represents the line of glue. The next set of petals, which is petal number 3, we're going to attach or glue it just slightly below the ball. You can see where it is. So we're going to take these petals and I'm just going to do 1 dot just slightly below the last row of glue, 1 dot, and I'm gonna go all the way around and just tack the petals in place. So we're just doing a dot just below the last petals, and you can see how far up I'm gluing it. 1 dot. And when you pull the petals straight, it naturally overlaps. So you're gonna have to do your dot of glue on top of the last petal, like that, and tack it in place. Another dab of glue, and glue it in place. So you're getting this. Oops. This, and then you just want to conform it to the ball and shape it. So you're getting this. Next, petal number 3. And try and position it so that the petals alternate. And we're gonna put a dab of glue exactly where we put the dab of glue the last time on the last row. So along the same lines, like this, we're tacking it in place. Along the same line, 1 dab, we're tacking it in place. So essentially we're leaving about this much open. That petal, not yanking, but just gently making it taut, because we want, in keeping it taut, not only are we keeping the shape of the ball, but we're keeping the petals flush, which is going to have an impact on the design at the end. So then we get this, and again, we just want to conform those petals to the shape of the ball. So we're getting this. So now we're switching to petal number 5. We have 7 filters, but I'm gonna work with 5 filters. I'm gonna put 2 filters off to the side because I'm going to show you what we're gonna do with those. So petal number 5, this is the first set. Feed it through. Try to position so it alternates with the last petals. And now for these petals, we're going to glue them halfway. We're not going up here, we're going halfway on the ball. So we've done petal number 6, petal number 3. Now we're doing petal number 5, and we want to do it midsection on the ball. Gluing, that is. And all we're going to do is tack 1 dot halfway up and tack it like this. You can see how far off it is. And we're going to try and keep these nice and taut because, again, we want to try and keep all those petals at the same level. So 1 dot midway through, make that petal taut, and just hold it in place. Halfway up the ball, stretch out that petal, let it hold in place. Last one, halfway up, pull it taut, and just let it hold in place. So now your petals look like this. They look like a square. So now all I want you to do is conform the petals to the ball and just make sure that those overlaps are overlapping nicely. And then you're going to come in and conform. And the more you conform at this point, the more texture those petals are going to have. So now you're getting something like this. And we're going to continue on with the next 4 filters, or the next 4 set of petals. Feed it through, position it, alternating the last petals, tack it in place so you can see what's going on. Give yourself more glue. Pull that petal nice and straight. We're going to tack it exactly where we did the last row, halfway up. We're going to tack that in place so you can see the layers. Tack it halfway up. Turn it around. Midway up. Stretch it into place so the bottom is nice and round. And we're going to keep doing that all the way around. So this is nice and taut underneath. And this is what it looks like from the top. Cover those petals nicely and conform. Just creating a nice ball. Like that. Anybody can do that. So now we've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 3 more petals to go. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm not changing a thing. Like you're forming a snowball. But you're not. You're conforming a peony ball. You can see the shape. See how all the petals are lining up? Square inside, round on the bottom. So we've got 5 sets of petal number 5. We have our last 2 sets of petal number 5, which we're going to add. But before we do, we're going to take some tissue paper, bathroom tissue paper. And this is 22 inches in length. And you're just going to fold it over. Just fold it over a couple times and give it a few little twists. But you want to keep it loose because we need the volume. And then we're going to take the 2 ends and we're going to glue them together. So we've got this. Let's position our flower correctly. And your flower should hold on its own if all those little leaflets are level. And then we're going to take this and we're going to double it. We're just going to create a nice little ring like this. We're going to put it through our wire. You see? It's on the wire. And we're just going to, and you want to double it up. So you don't want the 2 rings to separate. You want to double it up so it's 1 ring. And we're just going to push it in place so that it's coming just halfway up the flower, like this. That's how much space is on the bottom. Oops. And we want to keep about this much, that looks like about 1 inch of petals. So I think it's pretty easy to conform. So now that I've got that in place, then I'm just going to add some glue all the way around, just to tack this in place. We just want to tack it in place like that. And we want to, you want to keep this a little bit uniform. So I just pinch it in place. You might have to tack it a few places from the top, but essentially this is what you're looking for. So I just want to tack it in place so that it's like this. That's how much space from the top, from the side, and we're leaving these petals. So now we've got our tissue paper donut. And now we're going to add our second last petal, which has this color in the center. We're going to feed it through. We're going to add a bead of glue to the bottom to secure the petal in place. So now we've got this. What we're going to do is we're going to put a bead of glue just above the toilet paper on the flower. we're not going to stretch this too much because we want the volume, but we're going to tack that petal right above the toilet paper. Then we're going to go around and we're going to do that with all 4 petals. So a dab of glue above there. Now you can see that this petal is longer than this petal, and that's what we want. We want to create the last 2 petals slightly lower because we're trying to create this bowl shape. Okay, continue. Bead of glue above that toilet paper, and I'm not pulling or stretching, or I'm not doing anything too harsh because I'm leaving this nice and loose. So this is what it looks from the underside. It's almost like I've created a square. This is what it looks from the top. You can see that, oh, this part did not tack. So it should look like a box if you've tacked it right in the middle. So this is what it looks like from the top. Now we're going to come around, and looking from the top, we're just going to pull these petals and we're going to continue tacking it all the way around so that you cannot see that toilet paper. So all we're doing is just taking that petal and just tacking it above. You see? So you might have to do this on either side. Just a few more dabs of glue. But this is what you're creating. So now you can see I've just tacked it enough so that you cannot see the toilet paper inside. This is what it looks like from the side. That's what it looks like from the bottom. So it's starting to become more circular. And then from here, I want to shape it, but just gently because we don't want to lose the volume from the toilet paper. So at this point, I try to create a ball. Without compressing it too much. Okay, so I've rounded that off, and now it looks like this. And now we have the very last petal. The last petal, we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to position it so those petals are alternating. Tack it in place. And now this time, we're going to just add a bead of glue right a little bit below the last petal because we want this to have some flair. So I'm adding a bead of glue right along where that toilet paper is sticking out. So just like that, and tack it in place. You can see. And I do that to the 4 petals. So now we have this, and we just want to gently conform. Now we are going to have to tack these 2 side petals along the same line, glue line, as here, because we want to create a bit of a cup. We don't want to leave these out. So where those 2 petals overlap, I just add a touch of glue on the same line as before, and then I pull those petals together, and it just creates a bit of a cup. Here are the next petals. Just a little dab of glue along the center of the glue line. And then we'll do that again here. And then we'll do that with the last one, just down here where the last glue line was. Oops. Oh, I had to stretch that one out a bit. And then you've got this, and you've got this, and now we just want to conform all the petals to the shape of a ball, like this. So I've conformed it to a shape of a ball. And then from here, really all you have to do is just gently open up those petals, separate those petals, and you can almost run your finger just all the way around and just loosening up those petals. I've got a peony that looks like this. And we're going to add our 3 little leaves. Oh, I'm going to use the school glue just because it's just easier to conform the petals to the shape of the ball. And the school glue makes the paper wet, so it's easy for you to be able to conform it and have time to work with it so it's round like this. And we're going to just give it 2 snips to create these little legs like that. We're going to feed it through. We're going to add some glue to inside the straw, and then we're going to just push it down into that flower, and you can see the little plastic adheres to the top of the flower. And then we're going to use our little leaflets to cover up our straw, and we're going to glue it to the straw like that. So we want to create that little paper collar, number 5. And things always look a little bit more interesting when they're in odd numbers, unless you're trying to create something that has a lot of symmetry. So now we've got our little collar with those leaves, and add my floral tape. And you can just do little creases on the little leaflets. Looks like this. And the flower looks like this. So I think this is a very effective, especially when you put it in a vase and you know how the weight of these flowers bend. I think that looks really good. This is what the result is, and I think that that looks quite realistic. It does in a full bouquet and with all the other flowers. Here's another variation with slightly darker pink. So you could really make a lot of very interesting flowers. And I know that they do take a little bit of time, but I really think that they're worth it. And next week, we're going to be covering the leaves. And with the leaves, you can see how it does add a lot more interest to the peony. And the leaves also add a lot more interest to the bud. And wouldn't this look beautiful on its own in a vase? So you don't have to make a dozen or 2 dozen peonies like I have. You can just make 1 or 2 and make it a really just elegant single bouquet. It's so versatile. So I hope you come back next week when I share how to make the leaves. And I think that once you get the 3 parts together and get going, you're going to make fantastic, beautiful bouquets. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you give me a like. If you make these and you like them, I hope you share them. And if you'd like to see more content, I hope you subscribe. See you in part 3.